Hi, I'm Kurt Schiller, and I'm joined today by Len Damico, Head of Design for Arcweb Technologies. We're going to give you a little introduction to the design studio process. So Len, what is a design studio?
Kurt, a design studio is it's really one of the foundations of the product design process we implement at Arcweb. It's a session where we bring a lot of different stakeholders together in one room, co-located at one time. We strive for a cross-functional team. We strive for representation from engineering, from product, from QA, someone representative of the actual users who will be interacting with the product we're trying to build. We'll bring them all together in one co-located room, and we will democratize the design process. We'll bring them into the same room and have a number of structured co-design and participatory design activities that tend to lead to a lot better results than if we just went off and did some design on our own.
So the goal is really to make sure that you're getting all of the essential viewpoints that are actually involved in the product development process, instead of just the one person who you might have talked to so far who might not have a full view of the scope of the challenge at hand.
Absolutely, and it's about more than that as well. It's about generating all those different ideas, capturing the different ideas in the room, but then also driving towards some consensus around some of them. So it's not enough to just say, I now have a stack of sketches that I can react to. It's, well, let's put these ideas through the test. Let's see what the room thinks, and let's generate some consensus. So now we have some momentum after we leave the design studio.
Gotcha. So we've already started getting a little bit into the actual techniques and tactics that go on within it. But let's take a step back. Where does this fit into a digital product development lifecycle?
We've had a lot of success doing it as early as possible. So it's one of the foundational activities. We'll do it very early in the process, and that then starts to set the tone for what the rest of the engagement will look like. We'll all have worked together on something, have co-created something together, and at the end of one of these design studio processes, we'll learn that we all now have skin in the game. We all now have felt like we've built something together, so it ends up being a team building activity as well. But that's not the only place it works in the process. We can additionally, if we have a particularly tough feature or a particularly tough challenge later in the process, we can then call another design studio to jam on just that one particular feature.
In terms of the kind of different decision points that happen throughout a product development lifecycle, this sounds like after you've already figured out kind of what the business challenge is, that there's a product to be built, or can it be used even earlier than that to validate if there's even a challenge there to solve?
Because it is a group of techniques rather than a specific rote list of things to do, it can address a lot of different challenges. It can address an existing product, whether it's the most effective way to be solving a given goal. It can work on when there's an entire greenfield and we say, we don't even know what, we understand, we know what we think we want to solve, but we're not quite there yet. And it can work when you have a particularly focused challenge.
So you've decided that there's a challenge worth investigating with the design studio. You've gotten the stakeholders together and brought them into the room. What actually happens within the design studio?
I can tell you that. No, it's certainly not top secret. And that's one of the organizing principles of the design studio, is that it is such a very open and organic process. We tend to do a lot of, one of the core activities in the beginning of a design studio will be around requirements gathering. So if we have an appropriately scoped problem to attack, we will allow all the different participants in the room to specifically grab some sticky notes, write some things that they would like this ideal solution to a problem to conclude, and then we'll tack those up on our wall and begin to organically sort them into themes, or what we in the software world would call epics. So we'll start to have a bit of a heat map around some of the concerns and functions that we'll be looking to build into our product. Once we have those, we'll take some of the larger themes and we will start to do some participatory design activities around those. So we will give everybody an opportunity to sketch in a time box fashion around what a solution that is addressing that particular theme might look like. And we'd like to sketch because it gives everybody an equal amount of uncomfortableness, so that there's nobody coding, there's nobody wheeling a PowerPoint deck, there's nobody wheeling any design tooling. We're all on an equal playing field there. And this sketching is also the fastest way to make an idea in your head concrete. And the concreteness of the idea is a very important concept, because once we've done the time box sketch, we will then tack these all up on the wall, and you will have an opportunity to pitch your idea to the group. So in the pitching process, the sketch is really just a placeholder for you to describe the idea. So you can point to it and gesture to it, and it can be a reference point after your pitch. But it really exists to help make your idea more concrete. Once everybody in the room has had an opportunity to pitch their ideas, we then do a dot voting process where everybody gets to affix some cool dot stickers to their favorite ideas. And that way you can be on the entire other side of the room and tell, okay, the group gravitated toward this group of ideas.
But just to be clear, the goal of a design studio is not actually to make any decisions about the product at that time. It's to come up with maybe a range of possible decisions, just a better understanding. So even though you're voting, you're not actually making product design choices necessarily at that time.
Yeah, the fidelity of the sketches tends to be very, very low. So even if the entire group is into one particular concept, there's still a lot of different decisions to be made around that. So we're not walking out of a design studio and saying we know what our product is going to be. We're understanding a direction it might go, rather than having some specific ideas to tackle.
So to get a better idea of who might benefit from doing a design studio, what specific problems are you trying to solve when you deploy this particular technique?
One of the more subtle problems that you're trying to solve is requirement gathering. A lot of times I've observed that requirement gathering tends to be a person alone with a spreadsheet. And in our experience, that's not a real effective way to do it. And when you gather requirements in a more collaborative fashion, you tend to get a lot of different viewpoints, and you tend to understand the problem a little bit better, rather than worrying about what does requirement 1.1.3 mean. You have kind of co-created those requirements. So just by the virtue of co-creation, you then have a lot more buy-in for the team. There's no, what did they mean by this? And there's no, well, I don't agree with this. You've created those together. An additional benefit, an additional problem it seeks to solve is, as consultants, we bring together teams and we disband them pretty frequently. We're not staying together and working on a project or a feature for years at a time. So this allows us to really get to know each other a little bit and to generate some chemistry pretty quickly up front in a project. And then there are the obvious tangible benefits of, now we have tons and tons of ideas to assess. And even if something doesn't end up getting a lot of votes early in the process, as we continue to iterate through and begin to create actual wireframes and actual prototypes, we may meet a challenge and say, hey, I remember that thing that somebody suggested in Design Studio, and then you can revisit that.
So this has definitely become a pretty popular methodology. I think most people who are familiar with the product design lifecycle in some manner will have heard about this and be relatively well acquainted with it. Are there any situations where a design studio is not the right choice, despite maybe having some of the problems that you would normally solve with one?
I think the more firm the solution has been predetermined, I think the design studio is less appropriate. You get more value from a design studio when the problem is much wider and much more unscoped.
So if you're pretty late in the game, you have a pretty well-defined product and feature that you're trying to build, doing a design studio might just send you 10 steps backwards instead of necessarily giving you more insight on a problem.
It can, and it's difficult to tell organizationally when that will work and when that won't work. I have seen very mature products where you can finally scope a design studio and say, we are only talking about this one particular feature here, and get a lot of value out of it. So it depends upon organizational readiness, and it depends upon how finely you can scope a problem.
So you've got everyone together, you've done the design studio. What are you actually getting out of it in terms of concrete things that you can hold in your hand, and what are the next steps once you have those things?
Well, we will generally digitize everything. We tend to record at least the pitch present portions of the design studio so we can refer back to them. Those are often helpful readouts, and we'll go back over them immediately, but then again, to reference them to 2-3 weeks, months, whatever down the line is also rejuvenating as well. But these will then, the ideas that we generate in the design studio from the sketches and from the dot voted ideas ideas. We will then take those as designers and start to rough out user flows and high-level wireframes from those. So that's the point where we start to see something come together digitally. And when we share a prototype, we often have that shock of recognition. Oh, I remember this from the design studio. So it's really neat and fun to be able to bring somebody's idea to life.
And in terms of next steps, you would probably be going to establish concrete buy-in next around a particular set of features or a particular group of user stories that you identified preliminarily within the design studio.
Yes, absolutely. And that is a great point. That is one of the ways that we do capture that we can also capture without spending lots of time wireframing, is to just simply write out some high-level user stories to understand these are the different problems we were attempting to solve. Here's how we did it. And then we can start to evaluate those. Engineering can start to understand, all right, well, now that I know what the system needs to do, I can start to think about it architecturally. And we then have a checklist to make sure that we are capturing all the needs that we addressed in Design Studio.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today. Hopefully that gives you a high-level understanding of Design Studio, how it works, what it's for, and how you can use it when you're making your own product development decisions. Hi, I'm Kurt Schiller, and I'm joined today by Len Damico, Head of Design for Arcweb Technologies, and we're going to be talking about the Design Studio process, give you kind of a little bit of insight into what it's for, what it does, and I should definitely silence my laptop.
Oh, good times, good times.
All right.